This is a reusable rocket that launches and lands with no pilot on board. It's built specifically to take regular people into space. You don't need to be a professional astronaut with years of training and then work for a government agency like NASA. Instead, 6 people come to this launch site, train for 2 days, and then launch on this rocket, and spend 3 to 4 minutes weightless in space. This rocket is called New Shepard. Before I show you how it works and how the rocket and the crew get safely back to the ground, we'll need some background. Here's some important details that will improve our understanding. First, why go to space? Why are we doing this? Our early ancestors refused to stop at the edge of the map. Exploring oceans and lands, human nature has always been to explore farther. But there's a bigger picture here. Going to space is not just to satisfy curiosity. This rocket is made by Blue Origin, a space company. It was founded by Jeff Bezos, the same guy that started Amazon. Blue Origin is all about preserving our planet. There's only one Earth, and how we treat it will define our future. Their mission is to make it easier to move factories, power plants, and other buildings that pollute the Earth, to move these into space. This way we can preserve this precious planet that we call home. Building this road to space will take time. Sending regular people into space is one small step in a much larger vision. Next, let's talk about rockets. Blue Origin builds 2 rockets, New Shepard and the much bigger New Glenn. For size comparison, here are a few other rockets you might be familiar with. Blue Origin just builds these 2 rockets. New Glenn is built for sending much larger payloads that will stay in space for a while. New Shepard is built to send people and cargo into space for a very short trip. If you want to travel into space, this is your rocket. But I should mention that space tourism was also possible with Spaceship Two, made by a company called Virgin Galactic. This works a little more like an airplane, flying up to briefly reach the edge of space and letting passengers float for a few minutes before coming back down to the ground. Spaceship Two had its last flight in 2024, but they're currently working on the next version. For now, let's focus on New Shepard. The New Shepard rocket has 2 parts to it. First, we have the capsule. This is where the crew members will go, and the propulsion module, also called the booster. The booster has quite a few movable parts. We'll show specifically when and how these are used later in the video. The main body of the propulsion module is made up of an oxygen tank at the top and a hydrogen tank below. At the bottom is a single BE-3 rocket engine. It can gimbal or turn from side to side to steer the rocket. It provides the thrust to launch the entire rocket through the atmosphere and land it safely just a few minutes later. The astronauts will be located here in the capsule. Inside, there are 6 reclined seats. Each seat is positioned beside a personal window, some of the largest ever flown into space. The seats have a 5-point harness for the launch and the descent back to Earth. In the center is the abort motor, which gets the capsule away safely in an emergency. And yes, it has actually been used on a real mission. We'll get to that story in a minute. Now that we understand the rocket, let's talk about the edge of space. Generally speaking, once you cross this imaginary line, you are in space, or at least that's how most people see it. The Kármán line is about 100 kilometers above the Earth. If you were to drive that distance on the ground in a car, it would only take you about an hour. Now, let's look at a simple flight path. Here's how this works. The rocket engine fires for about 2.5 minutes, and then shortly after, the capsule separates from the propulsion module. Both parts will cross the Kármán line, which means we are officially in space. The propulsion module will fall back to the Earth, relight the engines, and make a safe landing. The astronauts experience weightlessness for 3 to 4 minutes, and then fall back to Earth. The parachutes ensure that the capsule makes it safely back down to the ground. Most diagrams show the journey as an upside-down parabola, but if we really want to be accurate, it would be more like this, showing the capsule going straight up and coming back down. To give some perspective here, New Shepard comes just past the Kármán line. Airplanes fly right about here, the space station is about here, and some of the farthest satellites orbit out here. And this is where the moon is. So are we going to space? Yes, but just barely. It's a small step in making space more accessible. Are they passengers or astronauts? This is really stirring up some strong opinions right now. It's true that career astronauts train for years and then sometimes spend 6 months at a time or longer in space. While on New Shepard, it's only a few minutes in space. Some would argue that this still fits the definition of astronaut, a person who is trained to travel in a spacecraft. In the end, you decide what you want to call them. But for this video, I'll be using the word astronaut because that's what Blue Origin uses. Our New Shepard astronauts are about to embark on the ride of a lifetime, but their journey actually starts about 3 days before the launch. It happens at Launch Site 1. We're going to the remote desert of West Texas in the United States. This is known as Launch Site 1, but sometimes referred to as the Ranch. The 6 crew members will have 2 full days of training in a few different areas. The area that gets the most attention is the launch pad. But let's actually start over here to the southwest at the Astronaut Village. This is where they will stay each night, but it's also a place to connect with other crew members and celebrate under the stars. It has 7 Airstream trailers. The last trailer is for crew member 7. This is a Blue Origin employee who won't fly with the astronauts, but instead will work closely with them throughout their entire journey. Let's make our way to the Astronaut Training Center. During their 2 days of training, they'll practice here and get prepared for the journey. Here's a giant picture of the flight profile so they can get familiar with it. They'll get fitted for their flight suits and make sure they're comfortable with the seat and 5-point harness. And here's a full-scale mock-up of the capsule. They'll go over procedures and make sure they're fully prepared for the unlikely event of an emergency, like a capsule abort. Mission control is here, and right next to it is known as the barn. It's a processing facility where the rocket is prepared for the next flight. Once a booster is ready, it is carefully mated with a capsule in preparation for its next flight. Depending on the timing, you may see parts from more than one rocket inside the barn. As of 2025, Blue Origin has built 5 propulsion modules and 4 capsules. RSS stands for Reusable Spaceship. Currently, 2 boosters and 3 capsules are used for active spaceflights. During the night before the launch, a semi-truck is used to move the rocket out of the barn. This is called rollout, and it's very similar to other space programs. It's time for the New Shepard rocket to start making its way to the launch pad. Once in position, the rocket is carefully rotated into the upright position, and ground support equipment is connected. In the hours before the launch, the booster is filled with liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. When these 2 propellants are combined, you get... And the byproduct of this is actually water. It's a big step towards cleaner spaceflight. About 45 minutes before the liftoff, the 6 crew members leave the Astronaut Training Center to head to the launch pad. They will be traveling in all-electric Rivian SUVs. This reinforces the commitment to keep the Earth clean while reaching for the stars. Buying a seat on New Shepard is rumored to be as much as $500,000. On other rockets going to orbit, tourists have paid tens of millions of US dollars just for the chance to travel to space. So yes, New Shepard is still out of reach for most people, but this is only the beginning. The goal here is to make space more affordable. The first New Shepard flight, NS-1, was in April of 2015. Then they did a lot more test flights before the first flight with a crew on board in July of 2021. In total, there have now been 32 New Shepard missions, 12 of them with astronauts on board. This includes the youngest and oldest person to travel to space, and several who are representing their countries for the first time in space. Initially, the astronauts had to walk up these stairs to get to the top of the first tower. But then Blue Origin added this elevator to make it easier. At the top is the safety shelter. This is the place where the crew members can seek refuge in an emergency. This room is also used for final preparations before entering the capsule. Once ready, each astronaut will walk across the gantry bridge, ringing this ceremonial bell before they cross. You'll notice the words, "Light this candle." The first American in space, Alan Shepard, spoke these words before his historic flight back in 1961. In fact, the rocket was named in his honor, New Shepard. The crew members are then helped into the capsule. The seats are numbered 1 through 6. The seat number is labeled right above each window. The wall next to each seat has a touchscreen and shows the progression of the flight. There are also a series of cameras around the capsule that will record the entire experience. New Shepard is a little different than most rockets you may be used to seeing. Normally, when a rocket goes to space, it soon starts going sideways, so gravity will be pulling it down towards the Earth. This is a bit of a balancing act. If we go too slow, the rocket will fall back down. If we go too fast, it will fly off into space. If we go just the right speed, it will stay in orbit around the Earth. This is how you stay in space, and it's how most rockets work, including New Glenn. It's an orbital rocket. New Shepard, on the other hand, is different. It just goes pretty much straight up in the air and doesn't need to go quite as fast. It's just enough speed to float in space for a few minutes before gravity pulls it back down. This is called suborbital. It's a very brief trip to space. It's also why the rocket is so much shorter. We just don't need as much fuel. If you remember from earlier in the video, the abort motor is in the center of the capsule. If something goes wrong with the rocket, it can get the capsule away very quickly. This can be either on the ground or during the ascent into space. It would be a rough ride, but at least you'd be safe. The abort motor was used once during an actual emergency in 2022. It was an uncrewed flight, meaning no astronauts were on board, but it proved that the system worked as it's supposed to. Once the astronauts are safely in their seats, the hatch is closed. The whole flight is autonomous, which means there are no pilots on board, but of course closely monitored by mission control. The control panel will also show the entire journey for the crew members to see. About 2 minutes before the launch, the capsule access bridge retracts out of the way. Then the BE-3 engine and aft fins perform gimbal tests to ensure that they are able to move as they need to. This is it. I can only imagine what the crew members feel at this point. When the countdown reaches 0, the BE-3 engine ignites and throttles up while still being held down. This takes about 7 seconds to throttle up to full power. At that point, New Shepard is released. The engine fires for about 2.5 minutes. The acceleration of the rocket will press them into their seats. It will feel like gravity is 3 times stronger than it normally is. Then we have MECO, or main engine cutoff. Just a few seconds later, we have separation. Both the capsule and booster will coast just above the Kármán line. This gives the astronauts 3 to 4 minutes of weightlessness. This is a bit like airtime on a roller coaster, but instead of lasting for a few seconds, it will last for a few minutes. On the way up, the booster's aft fins gave the vehicle a slight spin, so each window on the capsule can see all of the Earth during its flight. Most passengers in space experience something called the overview effect. It's a quiet realization that everything we've ever known exists in a single delicate world below. The beeping noise signifies that they have 30 seconds to get back into their seats and secure their restraints for landing. The mission is not over yet. The booster will return to Earth first because it's more aerodynamic. The shape allows it to fall much faster through the air. The wedge fins will deploy first. This will stabilize the booster on the way back to the ground. Then the drag brakes will deploy. This will significantly reduce the speed. Remember that the landing pad is about 3 kilometers north of the launch site. 4 aft fins will help stabilize the rocket towards the landing pad. At about 2 kilometers above the surface, the BE-3 engine will relight, slowing the vehicle down to a hover. At the same time, the 4 landing legs will deploy. The booster softly touches down on the landing pad. It will then be recovered and prepared to use on a future mission. Meanwhile, the crew capsule comes back a little slower. The capsule's flat side helps slow it down and keep it steady on the way back into the atmosphere. Normally, returning from space is a bit more intense because we're coming back from orbit. They call this re-entry. It normally causes burn marks on the side. For example, the Crew Dragon capsule has an ablative heat shield, which is made to burn away during re-entry. But the new Shepard capsule will be going much slower, so it doesn't need the same kind of heat shield. This is the reason it doesn't look quite as crispy afterwards. At an altitude of about 2 kilometers, the parachutes will open. First comes 3 drogue chutes to stabilize the capsule, and then the 3 main parachutes. The system is designed to come back safely even if 2 of the parachutes fail to open. It's time to breathe a sigh of relief. We're coming home. Just a few more things have to happen to help us land safely. On the bottom of the capsule is the crushable ring. It's designed to compress upon impact with the ground. Then on each seat they have the scissor mechanism. This will help cushion the touchdown at the end of the flight. Just before touchdown, there's a brief burst of nitrogen air to cushion the landing even more. Touchdown occurs just over 10 minutes after the launch. After landing, a recovery convoy drives to their location only a few kilometers from the launch pad. They secure the capsule and put steps in front of the hatch. This was much more than a 10-minute ride to space. It's a small step in our journey to make space accessible, to help us preserve Earth, our blue origin, the only home we've ever known.